Richtopia, a world with peace and justice. Richtopia, a world where everyone's rich.
Hi, my name is Daniel Lacalle and I'm a fund manager, an economist and an author. I started in different parts of the oil industry. Then what I did was to move to the city and start my journey, first as a financial analyst, then as an investor. And since then, I've been an investor. Most of my career has been in economics, and I took a PhD in economics. I have also written 3 books in English: Life in the Financial Markets, The Energy World is Flat, and the forthcoming Escape from the Central Bank Trap. In these books, I explore different parts of the economy and the energy world. My basic objective is to give to readers books that have both a strong underlying fundamental analysis with rigor, and at the same time books that can be available and read by not only people that understand the matters but also have interest without being experts. For me, being an author is the opportunity to share with people from all over the world my experiences, my knowledge, and also to question some of my analysis and have the opportunity to interact with people from many different countries about the challenges that the economic environment provides. The process for writing a book for me is quite organic. I write constantly. I write articles on a weekly basis, so I'm constantly thinking about ideas for a possible new book. Once I have an idea, what I tend to do is that I gather information, and I don't start with the first chapter and then move on. What I tend to do is that I write the chapters as the information comes along. So I'm studying, I'm reading papers, reading books or different essays, and getting to the points that I want to give to my readers and add it to the chapters. So predominantly what I do is that I have an idea, I know what I want to convey to the reader, and what I do is start to write each of the chapters as the information comes along and as I am finding exactly what I want to put together. Then once the book is all put together, what I do is to make it cohesive by generating a story that starts from end to finish. So the idea basically comes first, and then what I do is research and additions according to my analysis. My favorite business experience, I think I have many. I think that from the perspective of business experience, I would say that making difficult decisions, taking chances, leaving a comfortable job, coming to the UK to work in the city in a completely different environment was a very important decision and very nurturing. I would also say that the experience of when I started to write in the press was very fulfilling. And finally, I would say that the experience of communicating and giving lectures, giving classes is for me absolutely phenomenal. The first advice I would give to any economist or fund manager is to try to think outside of the box. Not from the perspective of just trying to say something different for the sake of saying something different, but also being against the box by understanding all the perverse incentives that exist in consensus. So I think that it's extremely important to have your own views, to back them properly, to analyze things both with rigor and with a very critical mind, and keep that critical mind all the time, so that your voice and your opinion matters and does not become another one amongst the myriad of people that say exactly the same thing. Technology always excites. This concept that technology is going to destroy jobs, this concept that technology is going to be negative for humanity or impact prosperity, is simply farcical, is a fallacy. There is so much quality of life improvement for everybody coming from the development of technology, that to even start to think that technology is negative is simply not understanding the world. Technology does not destroy jobs. Technology only destroys the jobs that we do not want to do. And what it does is create hundreds, thousands of different new jobs. 10 years ago, half of the jobs that we know today barely existed. So we need to be embracing technology, not fearing change. Change is positive, and this change, by the way, is also extremely positive for developing nations. It's extremely positive to reduce poverty, and it's also extremely positive to democratize information and knowledge, and this can only be good. So I'm very, very excited about technology, and I definitely see that it will create much more wealth, much more prosperity, a much better growth, much better quality of life, and many more jobs than what it destroys. If I have to think of a country that I see as an economic model for the world, I have to think of two: the US and the UK. We have to remember that the UK in 1975 was considered by Henry Kissinger a country that was doomed to fail. It was considered the sick man of the developed nations. And it's become one of the fastest growing countries, tremendous level of creativity, of competitiveness, very low unemployment, high diversity, and at the same time a tremendous amount of strength and willingness to adapt to every challenge. So I really admire the changes of the UK economy that has gone from being a country that was barely among the leading nations in 1975 to being one of the most admired and strongest in the world. The US, obviously, is an example of democracy, competitiveness, individuals thriving together to create a common good, and to me, something that is also very, very important, which is to prove constantly that despite the challenges, despite the risks, despite war, despite numerous geopolitical events, it's a nation that every time that there is a big conflict stands together as one and goes the next mile and develops further and gets stronger despite all of the economic and political challenges. If I was the Prime Minister of the UK for a week, I think that one of the things that needs to be changed is the way in which public services are managed. I think that with such high quality public services, the government has to think about sustainability, has to think about efficiency, and has to think about improving those services, not from the perspective of cost, but from the perspective of the quality of the service and the efficiency of those services. And I think that that would be the main thing that I would do. Instead of thinking about a budget, I would think about goals. I would think about goals of public service access, of quality of those public services, and to put together a program of incentives that would be focused on results, not necessarily on cost. I think that the number one priority for the US would be to keep the world believing in the US dollar as the world's reserve currency by changing the monetary policy of the country. I think that the US has fantastic, absolutely incredible opportunities, and sometimes it stands very aggressively towards a monetary policy that is eroding its position in the world. I think that the US government needs to rethink the position of the Federal Reserve and needs to rely less on aggressive monetary policies and think more about its role in the world, not by devaluing, but by strengthening. Escape from the Central Bank Trap is a book that is aimed at everybody that's interested in economics, whether the person that reads it is an economist or a fund manager, somebody that's knowledgeable or simply interested. And it centers its attention on this aggressive monetary policy that we have seen throughout the world that has led to central banks massively increasing their balance sheet, increasing money supply, lowering interest rates to unsustainable levels. And what is the impact for citizens of this policy? What happens when it stops? And how to benefit as an investor and as a citizen of all the changes that will come once that policy, which is coming to its end, starts to lose its appeal and starts to lose its strength. Life in the Financial Markets is my first book. It's a book in which I explain both how the financial markets work, my personal experience in them, and more importantly, how can investors understand the different concepts that affect all of their portfolios, be it from bonds to equities, different types of valuations, and all of the different aspects that alter the markets, from monetary policy to company-specific decisions, strategies, and a view also of what would be the ideal way of looking at investments, both from a retail investor to a professional one. In The Energy World is Flat, we explore 10 relevant factors that are flattening the energy world. I would say that the most important is technology and diversification of sources of supply. What we are seeing is an absolute revolution, both in fossil fuels and in renewables, that is completely changing the landscape of energy. And this landscape is going to be altered forever, precisely because the sources of supply of energy are changing, but also because the dynamics of demand are changing dramatically. And I think that what this book does is dispel some of the myths regarding peak oil, regarding increased inflation in commodities, and shows basically how the response from the demand side is much stronger than what many estimate, and how the supply is becoming more diverse, more efficient, and more abundant than ever. I would pick Adam Smith over John Maynard Keynes all the time. I think that John Maynard Keynes is a great economist, but his analysis and his view of the economy has been completely distorted by his followers to make it almost a rationalization of 2 + 2 = 22, which is completely farcical. I think that he's a great economist, but some of his recommendations have been more than overutilized. Adam Smith, to me, is a fundamental economist from whom we can learn a lot even today, because his writings are as relevant today as they were in his time. Facebook or Twitter, I would say I prefer Twitter. I think that it's more direct. But I think that Facebook is also coming back quite aggressively because people want to express more than 140 characters. And they want to communicate with people in a more friendly way. And unfortunately, in Twitter, you see quite a lot of aggressiveness and polarization of opinions. So I think both are great. But I would say that Twitter is more succinct, and if one can avoid the constant and aggressive trolling, then there's plenty of opportunities. Hillary or Trump? Not a big fan of Hillary Clinton. I think that the policies that she was defending have proven to be the source of very poor growth and very high unemployment in the European Union. I think that copying the European Union is not something that the US should do. And I think that many of the mistakes of the policies that she defended came from trying to force feed into the US some policies of the European Union, which has great things. Not necessarily a big fan of Trump, but I think that the return of supply-side policies is very important for the US. The US has endured too many years of wrong economic policies, and to have somebody that brings a different perspective, that brings a business perspective, that looks at increasing disposable income, lowering taxes, is refreshing. So if I had to choose between one and the other, I would say I prefer Trump. Inflation or deflation? None. I like disinflation. Disinflation from technology. I like the fact that thanks to technology, to efficiency, to competitiveness, the average citizen can access better quality services, better quality goods, more goods, and at the end of the day, a higher standard of living. I like disinflation. Physical currencies or digital currencies? I think that digital currencies have a lot to offer. And I think that the main thing that they have to offer is the fact that they're not being manipulated by central banks or governments, and therefore it's down to supply and demand, which is at the end of the day what a true currency has to be. So I would say it's not something of physical or digital currencies, it's manipulated currencies or not manipulated currencies. And I think that as financial repression, devaluation, constant manipulation of the quantity and cost of money increases, people look further for options that are closer to what real money is, which is a store of value and something that you want to exchange for goods and services because its value is higher, not lower all the time. I think Bitcoin is a revolution. It's the revolution of currencies that are outside of the control of government. Not only because it's not subject to central bank manipulation, but also, and I think this is very important, because it's not physical. Because even gold can be confiscated by the governments. Remember what Roosevelt did before the Second World War. So the difference here is that you have a currency that escapes the control of governments in many ways, not just in terms of manipulating, devaluing, and reducing the value of the currency, but also from the risk of confiscation. I think that there are many positives. There are also many challenges, and there are also many negatives that this nascent currency needs to respond to. Predominantly fraud, possibilities of use for criminal purposes, etc. But the idea of a currency that is accepted worldwide and is not subject to the manipulation of governments for their own benefits is quite appealing. With three people from history, I think it would be one of the people that I would like to spend a little bit of time with would be John Fitzgerald Kennedy. The period that he lived was such an incredibly challenging period with so many changes, with so many conflicts that I think his views, both about what he wanted for the US, but at the same time what he saw globally, would be extremely interesting, no? Somebody I would really like to have met, Friedrich von Hayek, the economist, also somebody that lived a very, very aggressive period of political changes. He was also someone who saw the threats of totalitarian regimes, and I think that I would have loved to spend some time with that person. And Jesus Christ. I think that imagine what it would have been to spend just a few days with that figure, no? To understand what was going on really, not from what we have read or learned, but what was going on around him at the time. I think that it would have been absolutely an elevating experience. There are numerous trends that we can see clearly now to 2030. One, I would say, is that I think is emerging quite rapidly is the aging of the population in the OECD. I think that the aging of the population in the OECD is one of the most relevant factors in the economy and has tremendous implications, fiscal implications, consumption implications, and also in the economic model that we are moving towards. So I think that that's one very important factor. The other is the multiplication of the middle class in emerging markets. I think that the rise of a middle class that comes from a completely different background to what developed nations have been is extremely positive for the world, because they come from completely different backgrounds, completely different cultures, and they also provide a very, very different perspective, because this is a middle class that will not necessarily grow under the umbrella of governments, but more from individual initiative. And I think that is very, very powerful. I think that another relevant trend is oil losing its crown as the king of primary energy consumption. I think that technology is going much faster, and efficiency much faster than what we expected, and that by 2030 we probably might not see oil as the king of energy consumption. All of this ends up with one word, which is we are going to see the most dramatic and at the same time fantastic improvement in technology in the next years, that I think that even the most forward-thinking people cannot even imagine how positive it is going to be for everyone in the next 10, 15 years. I always ask my team to read a book that is called This Time It's Different by Ken Rogoff and Carmen Reinhardt. It's a fantastic book because what it does is it explains how for 600 years we have committed the same mistakes in economic policy and in monetary policy all over the world, thinking, as the title of the book says, this time it's different, and it is not. So it's a very, very sobering book, very well written, and I always recommend it. Another great book that I recommend to everyone is The Road to Serfdom by Friedrich von Hayek. I think it's an absolute masterpiece of not only philosophical, it's so powerful in how it shows each and every one of us the potential that we have, and how the economies and the world improves from individual initiative, that I think that nobody should miss What I really, really like is to divulge economy and my opinions and my views, and to analyze the world as well as investing. So my aim is to continue doing what I love the most, which is what I do, which is to continue studying, continue learning about economy, continue investing. And the best way to learn and to continue to develop is to communicate and get the experience of the interaction with the rest of the world. So hopefully continue to learn and to develop with all of you throughout the social medias and my books. You can find me on Twitter, on Facebook, in my website. I'm very, very difficult to miss. Economy is complex, but is not complicated. We, the economists and politicians particularly, we make it complicated to make it seem undecipherable for the average citizen, but it should not be. My aim is to show to everyone that it is not a complicated science that cannot be understood by everybody. And my aim as well is to let everyone know that they not only have the opportunity, but they must get their own opinion about economic policy and what is happening globally, so that in the future we all achieve our goals together and we improve.
Richtopia, a world with peace and justice. Richtopia, a world where everyone's rich.